Hey, welcome back, everyone. So here, broadcasting from the road once again. I'm actually in Texas right now. And folks, we're going to have a great program tonight, something special. We have a special guest coming in around the halfway point. That's Roman Balmakov. You might know him as the guy in the Epoch Times advertisements. You might be seeing on YouTube. You might have seen on Facebook for a long time. He also does a show called Facts Matter. We're gonna bring him on around the halfway point to talk about election integrity, let's call it. Some of the audits now taking place and what's happening with that. Tonight, folks, we're going to keep the whole episode both on YouTube and on Epoch TV. So full episode tonight, folks. Everybody gets the whole thing. And good show coming up. So stick around, folks. Also, we're going to go into first a few news stories. We're going to talk about what's happening. First of all, with the whole, information coming out now that the policies of lockdowns, the one that had you and I stuck in our homes for a while, the one that had people not able to work, well, it turns out, folks, that those programs that really destroyed economies around the world may have actually caused more deaths than they prevented. The lockdown policy may have been more deadly than helpful for people. Also, folks, we're going to go into what's happening in China, because I was talking for a while about there appears to be a lot of paranoia at the top levels of the Chinese Communist Party. There was a recent defector who was one of the top-ranking officials within the intelligence community. Now, you might remember we were talking about this a couple nights ago, and I said, pretty much this is significant for the Chinese Communist Party. The CCP is acting very, very paranoid right now, and this is something that really is going to have a lot of impact there. It just so happens now that Xi Jinping, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, is making all the top members of the Communist Party give loyalty pledges. And he's saying that there is a traitor in their midst. I'll go into why this is important, folks, talk about that, a few other stories. Again, if you have questions, leave them in the chat around the halfway point. I'll get to them. Specifically, folks, if you have questions around the election investigations, anything around the audits, Roman Balmakov, again, is going to join us around the halfway point. So stick around for that, folks, coming up. And that said, as always, folks, great to see you all. Hope you're all doing well. It's from JTays. Hey, Josh, who can we sue for that? They stole our lives in a lie. Yeah, well, we'll have to see if lawsuits can come about in terms of them giving lockdowns and costing people's lives in the process of doing so. He said, we are 138 MAGA country. Yeah, again, I'm in Texas right now. I'm on the road again. Actually, I'm at the NRB conference doing some interviews here. One of the great conferences they have in Texas. Great content coming up, folks, so stick around for that. All right, that said, let's jump into the first stories for the night. And again, folks, if you have questions, leave them in the chat. Again, around the 30-minute mark, we'll get to them. All right, so first off, we talked about these COVID lockdowns, folks, right? You might remember, well, some of you might still be in the situation where governments shut down the economies, governments closed businesses down, governments made it so that you and I cannot really go out on the streets. And, really, if you did, there were pretty tight laws around it. In some countries like the UK, like others, like Australia during the early days of it, you could be punished if you left your house without permission. There were people getting punished for going out and gardening in the UK. Well, it turns out, folks, those programs where they stripped away just about every right you have, right? And you weren't allowed to go worship, none of that. It turns out that policy that they had for doing that may have killed more people than it saved. Let's talk about it now. Now, Epoch Times reports COVID-19 shelter-in-place policies failed to save lives, according to a study. And it says here, a new study that examined excess death data to gauge the impact of shelter-in-place policies on mortality concluded that lockdowns or stay-at-home policies failed to save lives. It says economists from the University of Southern California and the Rand Corporation. These are, in other words, not just random organizations doing it. This is, again, UCSD, a major U.S. university, and Rand Corporation, also very well respected. They sought to evaluate the net impact of these shelter-in-place mandates, the lockdowns, by examining excess death data from 43 countries and all 50 U.S. states. Now, the article continues a bit further on. It says this. It says, looking at data from both the United States and other countries, the researchers concluded, quote, We fail to find that the SIP policies, that's shelter-in-place policies, saved lives. We failed to find the policies saved lives. And they say, to the contrary, we find a positive association between SIP policies and excess deaths. You hear that, folks? The policies that destroyed our economies, the policies that kept us locked in our homes, the policies that put people out of business, right? The policies that made it so you couldn't go to church and worship, the policies that said you couldn't go in your yard and garden, those policies not only did not save lives, but they caused, quote, excess deaths. And so that's the reality of it, folks. A lot more coming out on this. And guess what else is happening? Real quick before we go into some other stories, another story here. Nearly 4,000 fully vaccinated people in Massachusetts have tested positive for COVID-19. 4,000. Now it says nearly 4,000 people in Massachusetts who have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19 have tested positive for the disease, adding to the growing number of breakthrough cases nationwide. Now, an important point of data on this is they changed the threshold through which a positive, you have the virus confirmation would be. In other words, the testing, when they give you these virus tests, they changed the standards after they started releasing these the vaccines, right? They changed the standards, the threshold that would determine if a person has the virus or does not have the virus. And what happens when you change the threshold? Well, the tests become, let's say, more discerning. Right? Prior to all this, the tests were more open. You could have a common cold or something like that. You might get a false positive. They started acknowledging they were getting false positives. They changed the threshold. And so even with that changed threshold, nearly 4,000 people in Massachusetts, again, fully vaccinated, have caught the COVID-19 virus, right? Now, this adds to the growing number of breakthrough cases nationwide, they're saying. This is important for a couple reasons, and hear me out on this. Now, according to the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, as of June 12th, there were 3,791 infections among the 3.7 million fully vaccinated people in the United States, or about 1 out of every 1,000 individuals. Take it for what it's worth, right? The important part with this, though, folks, is they're talking about this new variant, the D variant, which they say is spreading. Now, they claim, some people claim, right? Trust the science, right? They claim that this new variant is not impacting people who have the vaccines. The problem is that some data suggests otherwise. Now, we'll have to see what happens with this. Things are still kind of all over the place. To be honest, the vaccines are still not even through phase 3 testing yet. They're not FDA approved. There's a lot of problems that they're seeing with them. At the same time, people are saying they're working, so who knows? Biden's taking credit for it. Trump's also taking credit for the vaccines. The problem is, though, folks, you still have, again, mutations taking place of this virus. And they're now saying that this new D variant is going to be the one taking over, especially in the United States. I'll keep you all updated on this as we go forward, folks. I want to go now into what's happening with China. And again, some of what I was saying the other day might happen is already happening. Some of the stuff we were hinting at just a few days ago, folks, is already now unfolding in China. Let's say the pace at which things are moving with this is, I think, faster than I predicted. Let's put it that way. Already, folks, 2 days later, we see things happening already. Xi Jinping appears to be acting in a very paranoid manner. He's saying there are traitors among them in the high levels of the Chinese Communist Party. And we'll go into that in just a bit, folks. And after that, we're going to go maybe a couple more stories. And then again, Roman Balmakov, host of Facts Matter, the Epoch Times advertisement guy, is going to join us around the 30-minute mark. So stick around for that. First up, though, folks, again, we're totally demonetized on YouTube. You might notice we don't have Super Chat. We don't have advertisements. It's, again, because YouTube canceled them. Now, hopefully, we'll get them back one day. We'll have to see if that happens. But in the meantime, folks, we do have sponsors. Tonight's advertisement is brought to you again by American Hartford Gold. And with all the turbulence of the economy, multi-trillion dollars in government spending, inflation now on the very close horizon, we've been talking about it for a while, it's now here. You can consider investing in an asset that's often stable and that's typically on the incline. That's gold and silver. And folks, American Hartford Gold is one of the highest rated firms in the country with an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau. They can have your gold and silver delivered right to your doorstep or into your IRA. Now, to learn more about that, you can find a free 25-page information guide in the description below. Even if you just want to learn about investing in gold or silver, check out that guide, totally free, nothing attached to it. Check it out. You can also, folks, if you call them right now, you get up to $1,500 of free silver in all qualifying first orders. The number for that is 877-260-2764. You can also text Joshua to 65532. And folks, we also have a short video to show you real quick also. Check it out now. All right. Well, folks, again, big thanks out to American Hartford Gold. Again, you know, we're totally demonetized by the looks of the video. Didn't work. We actually had a video for them. It didn't work. So apologize for that. But again, folks, big thanks out to them. You know, they're helping us keep the show going. And so, big thanks. That said, folks, let's talk about what's happening in China right now. We've been talking about this for a little bit. Now, a bit of background on this. There are rumors right now, let's say, of a high-level Chinese intelligence officer who has defected to the West. The Chinese Communist Party is denying it's happening. There are a lot of media reports on it. They're saying it's happening. And while the CCP is saying that it's not happening, saying it's just a rumor, we see the CCP starting to behave in very paranoid ways. Now, why is this? Imagine if in the United States, when Trump was still president, if someone like James Comey, like the head of the FBI, suddenly disappeared, and then all of a sudden in China, you start seeing news reports saying James Comey is talking to the Chinese intelligence agencies. I mean, this is just hypothetical, right? Imagine if that happened. This is kind of the equivalent of what is happening right now with China. A high-ranking Chinese intelligence officer has defected to the United States and is allegedly, as we speak, talking to the highest levels of U.S. intelligence. Now, the CCP is denying this is happening, but while they're denying it's happening, they're not giving proof that the individual is still in China. Normally, for the Chinese Communist Party, if there were rumors like this, they'd have the guy go on TV. He'd talk about, I am still loyal or whatever, to the CCP or something like that. He'd make statements like this. They'd parade him around. They'd say, look at how Americans lie, and that'd be the end of it. They're not doing that, folks. On the other hand, they're doing something very strange right now. They are launching they're launching purges in the Communist Party for a while now, but they're also now making people take loyalty pledges. And they're also making people, again, let's say, as we're speaking right now, they're also looking at people and saying that there are traitors in our midst. At the top levels of the CCP, they say there are traitors, which means someone, folks, may have betrayed the top levels of the Chinese Communist Party, which means we may be seeing some very interesting information coming out from China. Let's go to what's happening with this. Epoch Times reports Xi Jinping, again, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, demands loyalty from top Chinese officials as rumors spread around alleged high-ranking defector. And it says here, Chinese leader Xi Jinping recently led all high-ranking officials in Beijing to retake their loyalty oath and pledge their allegiance to the Chinese Communist Party. It says this move comes amid rumors circulating on overseas Chinese media and some U.S. news outlets about top Chinese security official Dong Jingwei, who allegedly defected earlier this year and fled to the United States with his daughter. Now, for the CCP, the daughter is important. For the CCP, one of the ways they keep people from defecting, to make sure people don't defect, is they target their families if they defect. If an individual, say top-level CCP official, were to defect to the United States, and if that official didn't bring his family with him, his family would be punished in China. This is very common practice. You might remember, for example, Anastasia Lin. She was a Canadian beauty queen, Chinese originally, but she's a Canadian citizen. After she started criticizing Chinese human rights abuses in Canada, she was talking about in Canada, the Chinese Communist Party back in China targeted her father. This is common practice for the CCP. And so the fact that this individual is missing along with his daughter, again, is significant because they can't target his daughter to go after him. Now on this, right, it's going a bit further. All 25 members of the Politburo, the top decision-making body of the CCP. This is like the main top-level body that dictates everything that happens within the Chinese Communist Party. Xi Jinping is the top official within it, but there are actually some very powerful figures alongside him in it as well. And again, other top officials, such as the chairs of the Secretariat, state councilors, technically the government of China, the presidents of the Supreme Court, the chief prosecutor, and senior members of the rubber stamp legislature, the National People's Congress, and also the Central Military Commission, the Chinese military. All of these people, all of the leaders of the Chinese Communist Party were forced to retake their Communist Party oaths. This is at the History's exhibition hall in Beijing on June 18th. This took place just a few days ago. Now, the pledge that they gave included the statement, quote, "Be ready at all times to sacrifice my all for the party, never betray the party." And folks, on this too, before taking the oath, Xi Jinping, again, the head of the CCP, asked, right? He asked all leaders of the Communist Party to, quote, "maintain a high degree of consistency with the party," and in terms of ideology, politics, and in action, right? Now, on June 19th, one day after they gave this pledge, China's top watchdog, the Central Commission for Disciplined Inspection, asked all CCP members to fight against traitors and to never betray the party. Isn't that funny language when they're denying that this, say, defector left the United States, right? They're denying this happened. And suddenly they're giving loyalty oaths. Suddenly, as well, they're saying they're urging all CCP members to fight against traitors and telling them to never betray the party. Maybe the CCP is afraid of something, right? Now, Tong Jingyuan, a US-based Chinese affairs commentator, believed that these actions were a response to, quote, "some CCP senior officials who have betrayed the party recently." Now, Beijing recently released information that Dong, a vice minister of state security at the center of the rumors, was still in China. The Chinese Ministry of State Security, the MSS, kind of like a cross between FBI and CIA, the regime's top spy agency, published on its official website that Dong hosted a counterintelligence seminar in the ministry on the morning of June 18th. They're saying this, they're not giving proof. But the announcement didn't mention whether the seminar was held in person or online or who participated in it. In other words, they're not releasing quite complete information. Now, folks, why is this important? Now, the CCP right now, the Chinese Communist Party, is actually not as strong as they'd like to make it think. Right? They are behaving in a very aggressive manner right now. But you need to understand this in terms of, in the context, let's say, of traditional Chinese warfare thought. When you are strong, you act weak. When you are weak, you act strong, right? This is one of the main deceptions in warfare. Deng Xiaoping, one of the former heads of the Chinese Communist Party 2 leaders ago, had the saying of bide your time and hide your strength. Typically, when the Chinese Communist Party feels it is strong, it hides that strength. It does not want the world to know that it is strong, right? And when the CCP feels weak, it behaves in very aggressive ways. Now, how is the CCP right now as we speak behaving? You might remember prior to the whole outbreak of the virus, you folks were watching the show back then, or during the early days of it, I should say, my analysis at the time, which I was saying quite often, was I wasn't sure the CCP was going to last another year. I was very confident in that, actually. And really, we saw all the signs of it. The Chinese economy was collapsing. The CCP was getting cut off by U.S. sanctions. They had internal turmoil. There was infighting within the top levels of the Chinese Communist Party. They were talking about launching party purges, which they're now moving forward with. All these things, right? Trump was going after them with trade war. They were launching the wolf warrior policy where they were doing really aggressive foreign diplomacy that was backfiring. Australia, former close ally of the CCP, started criticizing them. Many European leaders started criticizing them. India is really done a 180 on the Chinese Communist Party. They were kind of not that good before, but really much more so now. Are they not getting along with the CCP? Many countries that used to be very close to the Chinese Communist Party have been marginalized by them. There's an international backlash against it. This isn't to say the Chinese Communist Party doesn't have a lot of influence, though. Through financial ties, through Wall Street, through big business, and through political subversion. The Chinese Communist Party does control a lot of foreign officials, foreign elites, foreign business leaders, and people in finance, journalism, academia, etc. It is these bodies, right, these, let's say, nodes of the CCP who can operate in other communities, academics, journalists, politicians, people in the pockets of the Chinese Communist Party, financial investors, banking officials, right, business leaders, you name it, folks who carry the line, who toe the line of the CCP. It's these individuals who make it appear the CCP is very strong. Now, as this is happening, all this is going on, the CCP is using these channels to boast, to pump things out, to make it appear again that they're very strong, while internally they're actually very weak. This is double-sided, though. I would say after the U.S. election, China really kind of rebounded. They're trying to push forward with the new economic policies. We'll have to see how they work. But the problems I mentioned last year, economic problems in China, the tariffs taking their effect, the sanctions taking their effect, internal instability, infighting with the Chinese Communist Party, party purges, etc. Things, folks, that could drive officials to defect from the country. Those things have continued. Now, as we say this right now, it's important to note, the more unstable the CCP is, the less the friendly veneer is visible, the more people see it for what it is, the more dangerous it actually is. The Chinese Communist Party already, as we speak, views the United States as its #1 enemy. The Chinese Communist Party, as we speak, already has programs like China 2025. They call it China 2035 now. They have programs meant to overtake the United States. There's unrestricted warfare. In Xi Jinping's own words, they're waging what they view as World War III because they're viewing this virus, right? They're viewing this virus as a World War III scenario, essentially. In other words, something that is reorganizing the structures of power in the world. They view this as a strategic opportunity. The CCP is very dangerous right now, but internally it's also very weak. And knowing this, if there's someone that defects from within the CCP at this time, this is something that could pull out that thread from that, say, weak point within their system. If information were to be revealed about what the CCP is actually doing, if their strategies were to be revealed, especially, well, I've been telling you folks, you know it already, their very hostile strategies against the West, their plans for the West, things that they're actually talking about publicly, but having, again, a high-ranking intelligence official defecting and bringing that information out to the West and saying it in a very credible manner, that is the wake-up call that the world needs to see through all of these lies and all of these systems, folks. And that is what appears to be happening right now as we speak. Some very significant things are unfolding in China. Now, folks, that said, I'll be keeping you updated on this. There's a lot of rumors and very strange behavior in the Chinese Communist Party right now. Something is happening. We'll have to see what it is, whether the rumors are true. The rumors do appear to be credible, but something big is happening in China. And again, the Chinese Communist Party is acting in a way that suggests they are terrified. They are afraid of something happening in their midst. Now, folks, I'll keep you updated on that as information comes out on it as well. That said, let's go to a few more stories. And again, folks, at the 11 o'clock mark Eastern time, in about 7 more minutes, Roman Balmakov, host of Facts Matter, is going to join us. And folks, again, we're going to go into some analysis on what's happening with the audits, the election audits, what's happening with the election investigations in other areas, and kind of where this is heading. That said, folks, let's go over one more story, one or two, depending on the time, and then we'll go into some questions. And again, Roman's going to join us for that. Epoch Times reports in New York City. Now, remember these riots that swept across New York City? Remember they were burning down buildings and looting stores? It was really quite wild, right? A lot of conservatives are comparing, trying to draw equivalence between these riots, the burned down buildings that killed innocent people, that looted stores, that really shut down communities, that have called for things like Chaz, where they set up this autonomous zone in Seattle. They set one up in Portland. Lawlessness, calling for the creation of independent states within the United States, really insurrection, technically, from that perspective. Comparing that to, again, what the Democrats are trying to stir up when it comes to the January 6th protest, where people entered the Capitol building, some forced their way in. Videos also show police literally opening up the gates and waving them in, bringing people in. It was the great walkthrough of the Capitol building. It turns out now that in New York, something interesting is happening, that hundreds of riot cases have now been dropped by the courts. Talk about it. Now it says here, New York City prosecutors drop hundreds of cases against rioters, according to a new report. It says New York City prosecutors have dropped hundreds of cases brought against people who were charged for participating in riots that exploded in the wake of George Floyd's death last year, according to a new report. Despite strong evidence in many cases, such as videos posted to social media, Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance Jr. has dropped 222 of the 485 cases, WNBC reported, citing court records. Now, 73 other involved convictions of lesser crimes, with the defendants avoiding jail time, while 40 cases were dealt with in juvenile court, with 128 remaining open. Now, folks, let's see if they treat the January 6th protesters with the same leniency, but this is what's happening in New York City right now. Another story here. This is an interesting one, actually. Biden is saying right now that tax credits for people with kids is going to be a first step. And we'll have to see what this actually means, because sometimes, you know, if they're lowering taxes, this is usually something conservatives like. If they're lowering taxes for people with families, I think most conservatives actually, it's quite a bit. Biden is pushing this through, and he's saying it's going to become something permanent, but he's also saying this is a first step. And one of the concerns people might have, and often comes up with things like this, is that oftentimes politicians will do policies, and the first step will be something that a lot of people can agree with. The first step will be things that people actually like. The next steps are what people often get concerned about. Let's go into what's happening with this. It says here, President Joe Biden said Monday that families will begin receiving part of the expanded child tax credit via advanced payments starting July 15th, while reiterating his intent to push for the benefit to become permanent, saying next month's payments are just the first step. Now, Biden made the remarks in a statement on the day the White House officially designated this Child Tax Credit Awareness Day, with the president touting the tax relief measure as a way to give our nation's hardworking families with children a little more breathing room when it comes to putting food on the table, paying the bills, and making ends meet. Now, it sounds good for now. Let's see what happens with it. Another big question in the U.S. will also be whether illegal aliens also get these tax benefits, or these benefits, and whether it's something that only applies to American citizens. Oftentimes, folks, yes, you have to be an American citizen to pay taxes, but people who work illegally in the U.S., they oftentimes use stolen identities to get Social Security numbers that they need to oftentimes work. And so it's a complicated system in the U.S. That said, folks, let's see what happens with it. Now, another story here, folks, a bit of pushback happening in California. We talked before about how there was this assault weapon ban in California that was overturned by one of the courts. That ban has now been overturned. Very likely this means it could head to the Supreme Court. Let's go into it. Epoch Times reports repeal of California's assault weapon ban blocked by Ninth Circuit Court. And it says a federal appeals court this week put on hold a judge's ruling overturning California's 32-year-old ban on so-called assault weapons. Now, on Monday, a three-judge panel in the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals issued a stay of U.S. District Judge Roger Benitez's June 4th order. It followed appeals from the state officials on the decision, saying that the law is needed to prevent gun deaths. Now, what this likely means, folks, is it's going to keep going to higher courts. We'll have to see now whether the higher courts take it on. But if they do take it on, actually a higher court ruling means that whatever they rule on will not just be the law in California, but possibly the law across the United States as a whole. And this is significant because a few other cases like this are going on right now. The Supreme Court, as we speak, is set to hear cases including whether you can have high-capacity magazines and whether you can have concealed carry firearms, handguns typically. These are now being heard by the courts. If the court also hears, the Supreme Court also hears, in addition to high-capacity magazines, concealed carry, also your right to own what they designate as assault weapons, and there's no such thing as assault weapon. It's kind of a manufactured political designation, but they're trying to lay out what that defines. It sounds intimidating, right? But whatever happens with these cases, folks, will very likely determine the gun laws throughout the United States. And we'll have to see what happens. Now, an important point with that, technically, you do have, through Trump appointments, Republican-appointed judges in the Supreme Court really playing the main role, right? Republican-appointed judges technically having the majority in the Supreme Court, but oftentimes we've seen that the Supreme Court doesn't often necessarily rule along partisan lines, let's say. We've seen the Supreme Court judges, including those elected, including those placed by Trump, still voting for things that Trump and normal conservatives would not support. And so we'll see what happens with this, folks. It could go either way at this point. All right, folks, that said, let's jump into some questions. Again, folks, if you have questions, leave them in the chat. We'll try to get to them. Again, we're going to have Roman Balmakov joining us in just a bit. Folks, if you have questions, leave them in the chat. We'll try to get to them, especially as it relates to anything relating to the elections. Let's go over a few questions first. Now, this is from the one and only Pinky Pinky. You said if Trump comes back to the White House this or next year, for example, if the elections are overturned, is he obligated to take Pence with him? It's actually a very good question. In my understanding, it might be iffy. I mean, we're kind of in untreaded territory right now. Technically, folks, it's debatable, but technically, if Trump were able to prove that enough electoral college votes were lost through fraud, if they have election audits in Arizona and Pennsylvania, maybe another place, if they can show that enough electoral college votes were lost because of irregularities or fraud, whatever they find, that could be enough to get Trump back into the White House. But the problem is the process for it. Does it go to the Supreme Court? Does it mean Biden steps down? I doubt that Biden would step down. Or does it mean, the Democrats probably challenge it in court again? They challenge the audits. They challenge things. They lock it in court very likely for the next 4 years anyways. We'll have to see, folks. If Trump were to be reelected, he was running alongside Pence, and technically Pence was his running mate. And technically that may mean that Pence would become vice president. And we'll have to see what happens with that because, again, who knows, because this is really, really untreaded territory. All right, folks, let's show you a quick preview we're working on over at Epoch TV. I mentioned already that, again, we're totally demonetized on YouTube, but we have created our own platform. That's Epoch TV. This is an uncensored video platform. We have a lot of shows there, trying to get even more shows for you all, great content. And again, by supporting it, you also help keep Crossroads going. You help support our show, everything we're doing here as well. When we come back, folks, again, we'll have Roman Balmakov here, and we'll go over what's happening with the election. So stay tuned for that. We'll show you a quick trailer now of what's happening over at Epoch TV. One of the big issues we're seeing right now is this audit of the election now taking place in Arizona.
Election auditors in Arizona say they have completed the hand recount of ballots in Maricopa County.
Are we going to see a Trump 2.0?
We are the ones standing in their way, and we will never get out of their way.
We do know that a number of those swing states are then going to move in and probably have recounts of their own. And then step two, if they say, the same thing, that Trump won, take a deep breath. What's the next step? Via this election recount will determine whether our country goes back to the Constitution or goes all the way to China.
All right, folks, welcome back. And again, joining us tonight is Roman Balmakov, host of Facts Matter. He's also known as the Epoch Times advertising guy.
Hey guys. You know what? I wanted to start by, first of all, saying thank you to Josh for inviting me over. And second of all, I noticed that Josh does not very often suggest that you smash that like button. Honestly, because if you're watching this live right now, you know that, this show is generally suppressed by the YouTube algorithm. Just based on the content alone, Crossroads has over 600,000 subscribers. Yeah. But it should have in my estimation, over 1 million by now, just based on the coverage you have that you can't find anywhere else, right? So smash that like button if you're watching right now. Even if you're not watching live, smash that like button anyway so that this video can be shared out to ever more people.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, Roman's the ad guy. He's good at. He's better at this than I am. Yeah, folks. Again, we're on tour right now. We're in actually Texas right now. We're at NRB conference, and so again, great to have Roman here with us, folks. Now, if you have questions, again, leave them in the chat. We're trying to get to them, and especially if you have questions about what's happening with the elections, leave them in the chat. We're trying to get to them. And hey, it looks like everyone's saying hi to you, Roman.
Okay.
Yeah, J. Marie just hit it. ND. Thank you. D. Guarino. Yeah, thank you. You folks are great. All right, let's go over a few questions. Let's go over a few stories in the meantime. And then again, folks, leave questions in the chat. We'll try to get to them. We'll go over some stories and go over some questions, kind of mix it up both. Stay tuned, folks. Again, we're going to do the whole program tonight on both Epoch TV and on YouTube. And so again, we'll be here straight through tonight. Now, let's start by talking what's happening with the vote that was supposed to be on the Democrat bill. You might remember, folks, the Democrats are trying to push forward a bill to federalize a lot of the election laws. Now, on this note, let's go over what's happening with this. Now, Senate Republicans have filibuster to block this Democrat-backed voting bill. Now, an important point on this, we'll go over it a bit. Senate Republicans on Tuesday evening blocked a Democrat-backed election-related bill via the filibuster, something the Democrats want to overturn, but there's a lot of resistance even among Democrats in doing so. Now, this potentially is setting up a battle over the 60-vote legislative procedure, the filibuster. Senators voted 50-50 in the equally divided upper chamber on advancing for the People's Act, a sweeping bill that would change the U.S. voting laws, again, from the federal level. And folks, in the Constitution, where does the votes get decided? It gets decided in the state legislature, right? This bill was co-sponsored by every Democrat except Senator Joe Manchin, a Democrat who doesn't believe in supporting this bill. He called it too partisan, and he's proposing his own election-related bill. Now, although Manchin ultimately voted to allow debate on the bill, Manchin said early Tuesday that he would vote to approve the measure because he wanted the Senate to debate talks with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and found common ground with my Democrat colleagues, he's saying, on this. Now, during the Senate session, Vice President Kamala Harris presided over the vote. However, she was not able to cast a tie-breaking vote as Republicans invoked the filibuster. Now, let's see what happens with this, folks. The filibuster is what is stopping this from happening, and maybe Joe Manchin. But as we speak now, Biden's saying he's talking to Joe Manchin. Maybe he's going to switch back again and side with the rest of the Democrats. We'll have to see. Roman, I guess, what's your take on what's happening with this whole filibuster? Is it, the debate around that and around what this whole federalizing of the elections means?
Yeah, it definitely puts a lot of pressure on Senator Manchin. I remember just how long ago was it? It must have been maybe even just a week or week and a half ago. He published an op-ed in the Washington Post where, well, he actually published one in the Washington Post, and then he published another one in a local newspaper from his own region, which I think he's from West Virginia. He published that local in a local newspaper there. And one of the sentences that he said is that he will not do anything to weaken or, I believe, like dampen the filibuster, right? Because a lot of people are talking about maybe lowering the threshold of the filibuster from 60 to 55, right?
Yeah, which still, for Republicans, they would still be able to block a lot with that. But again, a lot of times it's a sliding scale. It's a downward slope. You start changing it, people are worried it's going to be 55 today, 54 tomorrow, and 50, maybe 50 a few days from then. That's the big concern with it,
Yeah, so that's the one thing. It's putting a lot of pressure on both Senator Manchin as well as Kirsten, what was her last name, from Arizona, the other senator from Arizona who, she's the female senator who is rejecting lowering the threshold for the filibuster. And she, her and Joe Biden, basically, they got a lot of flack from, her and Senator Manchin, they got a lot of flack from Joe Biden, who actually called him out pretty publicly. He said, said something like,
Christensen Sinema.
Oh, Christensen Sinema. She said something, he said, Joe Biden publicly said something like, yeah, we could get a lot more done if two of our Democrat senators weren't voting with the Republicans so often, right? So, they are getting a lot of public flack for it. So that's one. But then the other part is really to consider, and that's something that the mainstream media in this country seems to not really cover, is the purpose of the filibuster, right? Why does it exist? Because nowadays, if you look at a publication, especially any of the like large corporate media, they seem to gloss over that fact. They just kind of, I mean, they paint it as a racist, relic from the Jim Crow
which
era.
is ironic because the Democrats are the one defending it when they were the minority. They were the ones defending it before. But yeah, go into it. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah,
but I mean, basically, it stops the country from wildly swinging from one policy position to the next with a change in which party leads the Senate. First of all, and second of all, it creates a problem because let's say the Democrats in this session, they get rid of the filibuster. Well, who's to say in the next session the Republicans don't take over the Senate and then they blast through all their policy positions? I mean, that's what happened with the judges, the confirmation of the judges, right? Mm-hmm. The Democrats, they eliminated the filibuster on confirming the circuit court judges, and then based on using that as a precedent, the Republicans then eliminated the filibuster for confirming the Supreme Court justices, and that's ultimately how the last two Supreme Court justices, the seats were able to be filled, right? So it's kind of like this. It's a double-edged sword because you want to do it now. You want to push your agenda through. You want to get HR 1 through. You want to get all these gun bills through. But who knows? If you eliminate the filibuster, that's the thing with power, right?
It could push back on them, and that's what they're saying. Because again, 2022 is right around the corner. It's already 2021. I mean, you have Trump getting ready to start campaigning again in a few days, folks. 26, he's going to start campaigning again. The elections that could see Republicans win back both maybe the House and the Senate is just around the corner. And again, if the Democrats get rid of the filibuster right now, that means again that they're risking the Republicans, pretty much doing the same thing and doing whatever they want. We'll have to see what happens with it. A few questions here. This is from Lynn Fay. You said, do you think Manchin will cave on the filibuster? I think he might if Republicans don't compromise with him. I think he's on the verge of doing so. I don't think he's going to cave on the filibuster. I think the filibuster is more controversial for a few of these Democrats than even the election the election, what do they call it? Access bills, the Democrats are calling it. I think that they would be less likely to get rid of the filibuster than even that. But again, we'll have to see what happens with it. Rome, what do you think? Do you think Manchin's going to cave on ending the filibuster?
Let's see. I actually wanted to pull up his exact quote because he said something. I mean, what he wrote in that letter was very just. Here, this is a quote from him, and it was published in. Let's see. Oh, so this is from the Washington Post, and this is a quote, direct quote from Senator Manchin. Quote: "The filibuster is a critical tool to protecting that input and our democratic form of government. That is why I have said it before, and I will say it again to remove any shred of doubt. There is no circumstance in which I will vote to eliminate or weaken the filibuster." So that's what Joe Manchin said himself, and this was just like a week and a half ago, and he wrote that in an op-ed in the Washington Post. Washington Post, of course, being essentially a Democrat Party newspaper. So he wrote that, for that audience, right? So I mean, that would be a big reversal. I mean, he still, of course, could do it, but it would be a big reversal.
Maybe he'll change his mind, but yeah, it would be a big reversal from what he's saying already again in his op-ed in Washington Post, basically. And again, unless they overturn the filibuster, even if Joe Manchin votes with the Democrats on the election bill, Republicans still are able to block it. So a lot of what the Democrats are trying to do right now can't get through because, again, the filibuster is in place, and Manchin's vote would prevent the filibuster from being removed. Unless they got a Republican to switch sides, which who knows, maybe they'll have a better chance of that than getting Manchin these days. Who knows?
Sure.
Yeah. All right, next question here. This is from Aaron Shimano. You said most media in the province of Quebec in Canada are left-wing. Do you know when there could be a French Epoch Times edition in Quebec? We have a Canadian edition.
Yeah.
We're in Canada. Or do we have a French one in Canada?
I know the guy who started the French edition of the Epoch Times.
Okay, there you go. Yes, we have a French edition.
Look it up.
Yeah, we go to the homepage of Epoch Times. We have a French edition.
Well, we have a French edition for sure. But I could have sworn we even had if I'm not mistaken, I might be, I will fact check myself later on that, but I could have sworn we had a actual printed French edition in Quebec.
I know we used to, man. We should still have it. We'll have to see. A lot being planned, folks, a lot growing right now, and we'll keep you updated on it. But hopefully you'll be able to get the daily paper in more places than we currently have right now. Let's put it that way. We're working on a lot of stuff. We do have a French edition. You can already read it online. I will have to see. I'm not sure if we print in Quebec in French, but we do have a Canadian edition printed there as well in English. I'm not sure if I'm not sure if again the French edition's there, but you can read us online in French.
Yeah, it's fr.theepochtimes.com, or if you just go to the homepage under editions, you can select the French language. And if you're interested in the print copy, maybe just call up the Canadian Epoch Times office and ask them. I'm sure they can help you out.
Yeah. Let's go over another story, then we'll go into some more questions. Now, let's talk what's happening in Georgia, because now a lot of us have been really focused on what's happening in Arizona. The election audit is now taking place. It's set to wrap up by the end of this month. And in August, we should be getting the report on the findings from the audit. But actually, alongside that, there are other investigations taking place in the U.S. Georgia is one of the other big ones. And real quick, Rome, is it 18 states now have sent representatives to go watch how Arizona is doing its audit? It's 18, right?
Right. So as of about a week ago, the president of the Arizona Republican Party said that there were 13 states. And since then, I believe that at least another 5 visited. So I believe it's 18, but the last official number was 13.
Yeah. But as this takes place, actually, there are other investigations taking place right now. Now, the investigations would not be considered full audits, not on the scale of Arizona, at least. But Georgia is one of the big ones. Let's go real quick what's happening in Georgia, then we'll go over what's happening a bit more. Now, Epoch Times reports Georgia is conducting secret 2020 ballot review, keeping plaintiffs in the dark. And it says here, after several Fulton County, Georgia poll monitors testified last year that boxes of mail-in ballots for Joe Biden looked like they'd been run through a photocopy machine. Sorry. State investigators quietly broke the seal on one suspicious box and inspected the hundreds of votes it contained for signs of fraud. Real Clear Investigations has learned exclusively. Now, at the same time, a key whistleblower told RCI, Real Clear Investigations, that state investigators pressured her to recant her story about what she and other poll monitors had observed, what they call unusually pristine, again, allegedly maybe photocopied, mail-in ballots, while sorting through them last November's hand recount. Now, a bit further in it says, although the ballots are at the center of disputes about the Georgia presidential race, which Joe Biden won by just 12,000 votes, the state never disclosed its probe to the public or to election watchdogs suing to inspect the ballots. So, Roman, what's going on with this?
Yeah, so I've been following this case for a little bit. And by the way, that article and almost any other article that is by Real Clear Investigations is so good. They go deep. Those guys really do excellent work, and I'm glad they publish with us. So in Georgia, it's a very interesting case. So basically, in December of last year, so in December of 2020, a number of people who live in Georgia, so Georgia residents, they filed a lawsuit against the Fulton County in order to be able to look at some of the ballots, because they said that there was like an anomaly in the tabulation. So they said that there was too much of an increase for Joe Biden and too much of a decrease in President Trump, and they presented quite a bit of evidence to the judge in the case. Some of which is what was mentioned in this case. So there was a poll manager as well as 3 poll workers who reported seeing boxes of ballots, and when they took the ballots out to scan them, it was basically like, I mean, you know what it looks like when you see a dot that's circled in, right? It's like it might not be perfect, might be using different colored ink. Again, it might not be perfect, but what they were seeing, allegedly, what they claimed to have seen, was perfectly exactly the same circles on every single ballot, like right?
One after the next, without downvoting, I believe, too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. In other words, people were only filling in that one vote and not voting for other candidates for other positions, which is actually really unusual, some of these.
Yes, it's a big red flag for one. And then the second thing that she mentioned was that it looked like it was basically a Xerox. So somebody did one, right? And she said that there was like a bit of a crescent in the middle. So it was almost like they filled it in, and maybe they left like a little white spot in the middle, just by when you're yourself filling out a bubble, right? You might leave a little white spot in the middle, and then it was just Xeroxed over and over. And so ballot after ballot had that exact same spot right in the middle of the ballot.
So in other words, folks, either it was Xeroxed or randomly with thousands of people exactly filled in the exact same way and left a little white spot in the middle that looks exactly the same. Yeah. So whatever you think might be more probable, either thousands of people, filled in that dot, pristine, exactly the same, and left the exact same little crescent white spot in the middle, right? One after the next, a whole stack of them, or they were Xeroxed. Yeah. So you tell us what's more probable with that.
Yeah, at the same time, it's an allegation, right? That's what she said. That's what she said, and that's what the other 3 poll workers said in a sworn affidavit. And a sworn affidavit is not just like a random statement, like somebody just saying it to you. They are saying it under penalty of perjury. They're basically saying in a court of law, hey, this is what I saw. I attest to what I saw, and if you find that I'm lying, you can actually, put me in jail, and I can pay hefty fines, right? So a sworn affidavit is a pretty serious document that should be investigated. So okay, so this was some of the evidence that was submitted. So that was back in December. So this case went up until May of last month. So I mean, that's 5 months of legal back and forth. These cases almost always take a really long time. It's kind of comical how long they take, given the fact that like an election is over within a month, right? Like, well, I mean, definitively it's over by January 20th, which from December is like a month and a half, right? But anyway, it took about 5 months of legal back and forth for the judge to say, okay, you can examine these ballots. And so what he did was he provided the attorney and the plaintiffs in the case with images of the ballots. However, so the images he provided were 200 DPI. So that's like, I mean, if you know anything about like about camera equipment, 200 DPI is very blurry. Like if you just Google right now 200 DPI versus like 600 DPI, you can see that it's almost, I mean, it's very difficult to examine anything forensically with that level of resolution. And so then the lawyers went back and they said, hey, we can't audit this. Like this is too low resolution. We need at least 600 DPI to actually take a look at these ballots. And so after another month of going back and forth, the judge actually agreed and he said yes. So he set up a date where the plaintiffs, the lawyers, as well as people from the Secretary of State's office could actually go to where the ballots were being kept in the warehouse. They could meet and then they could watch the ballots be scanned in order for them to, at least 600 DPI for them to be forensically examined later. However, literally the day before they were to go to the warehouse, there were, I believe, 3 different offices within Fulton County, but generally officials in Fulton County filed motions to dismiss the case. And the judge, what he did is he postponed the trip to the warehouse indefinitely. He just said basically, hey, we need to take a look at their motions to dismiss. We're not going to go to the warehouse. We need to hear them out, right? So that was like a month ago. Okay, so then this is where the story gets a little...
Yeah. Wait for this one, folks. Yeah.
This is just where the story begins to get weird. Again, okay, I'll just tell you, and you can decide whether it's weird or not. How about that? Although I already colored your perception, I'm sure. So 2 days after the judge says, hey, you're not going to the warehouse, we're going to postpone it until we hear these motions. This is what happens. An alarm goes off at the warehouse where the ballots are being stored. The security alarm goes off. Then we have a photo of the door, one of the back doors to this warehouse that was left wide open, right? There was a photo, somebody took it of their camera. And then, this is my favorite part of the whole thing. There were 2 sheriff's deputies, which were supposed to be watching the ballots, watching the warehouse to make sure it was safe and secure. However, 20 minutes before that alarm went off, they left. They just left. They left the warehouse. It's unexplainable. They didn't have from the documents I've seen, they didn't have an actual reason for why they left. And so it's like, okay, what is going on? I mean, that seems fishy on the surface. I mean, it warrants an investigation. And then we reached out. We here at the Epoch Times, we actually reached out to Fulton County officials to get a statement from them. And the official got back to us and she said, yeah, we're still investigating why the alarm went off. But, there's no reason to suspect the ballots were tampered with.
Yeah, they just left the door open and the alarm went off saying there was an intruder and the police were supposed to be watching it. Just happened to leave 20 minutes before, but there's no problem, folks.
Yeah.
Nothing to be concerned about, according to the officials there.
So that's what happened with that. And then so June 21st, which was yesterday, the judge finally had that hearing where he heard out those motions to dismiss. Then he didn't actually decide what he's going to do or not. He said he needs a few more days to deliberate. However, the story that we're reading now, basically what this is saying is that without telling anyone, a few months back, state investigators actually unsealed those ballots, those ballots which are supposedly Xerox, to investigate them without telling anyone, without any kind of transparency, which is, again, it might be in good faith. Maybe they're just, they should know the law. So, I don't know why they're doing it this way, but let's say they just wanted to get it done. They just wanted to get it done as fast as possible. The problem is that publicly, there was a recent poll which was taken, which showed that like 75% of Republicans have very low faith in the integrity of our elections. And even something like 30% of Democrats believe that there was fraud in the previous election, which might have helped Joe Biden get elected, right? That was the result of a poll. And even at CPAC, right, there was a straw poll which found that 61% of CPAC attendees they said that election integrity is their #1 concern in the entire country. Like that's the single biggest concern that they have. And CPAC is it's a big event. It's not like a niche event. CPAC is the most mainstream conservative event in the entire country. And 61% of attendants who were polled there said that election integrity is their #1 concern. And with that, like when you have, security alarms going off, when you have the Fulton County officials filing motions to dismiss saying, no, you can't examine these ballots, when you have state investigators going in secretly, unsealing these boxes, looking at them and saying, oh no, these weren't Xerox, and you can't, okay, what are you going to do about that?
Yeah, they just happen to be filled in exactly the same and have the same little white crescent left in the center. Allegedly. According to people who've sworn under penalty of perjury that's true, several of them.
Yeah.
But, take it for what it's worth, right? Yeah.
And I mean, in totality, the problem is like of course you have the problem of the actual results of the election. What are they? Why is there so many troubles in actually running these audits or these investigations? But then there's the public relations aspect. I mean, at least I would estimate at least half of the country really doubting the integrity of our elections. And instead of being extremely careful and extremely transparent about all of this is the kind of result or the kind of investigations we're getting here in America.
And that's the bizarre thing. I mean, this is what I've been saying for a while now. If you're Joe Biden, and if you're even any Democrat leader, and you're actually concerned about you're concerned about social stability to such an extent that you'd want to surround your office with National Guard troops because you're worried about insurrection, you're worried about people you believe have been misled by, let's say, disinformation, and they pose a threat not just to civil stability, but even maybe to your own safety. Would it not be in your interest to allow for normal investigations to take place to prove that you're right, to prove that things were done with integrity, and to prove there are no problems? Wouldn't that be the normal track you would want? And so if that is the case, why are they trying to prevent these investigations? Why are they doing things to stop them from happening? This is one of the big, I think, questions that needs to be answered. And, we'll have to see what happens again, because as we've discussed, 13 states are now confirming that they're going to want to have again, right? That they're looking into possibly having again their own audits of the election. And 5 more have stepped forward suggesting they may do the same. As this happens, Roman, where are we at with the Arizona audits?
Well, that's another whole box to unpack there. So this is everything we've discussed is happening in Fulton County, Georgia. It's one county in Georgia, right? With the Arizona audit, it's kind of a similar story. The Democrats have fought the Republicans and pretty much every step of the way to get this audit conducted. At the beginning, they fought them against the audit. Then they fought them at every step of the way. They basically took away the signature verification portion of the audit. They took away, at the federal government, at the federal level, they sent a letter. It's kind of a semi-veiled threat saying like, hey, if you actually go and verify the identity of the voters, making sure they are who they say they are, making sure they live where they say they live, that's a form of voter intimidation. And so the Senate president actually came out and said that that's on pause, right? And so they've kind of been like chipping away at it piece by piece. And that's outside of the fact that if you right now, let's say, Google Arizona State Audit, or you look it up on YouTube, all you're going to get is negative press coverage, right? So that's kind of the media perception part of it, right? And in my opinion, that's pretty dangerous because it's not, and it's kind of like this lockstep between the media and the big tech overlords that we essentially serve. Because for instance, I'll give you a great example. At my channel, Facts Matter, which you can subscribe to after
it's a good show. He's all right. He's all right. He's on Epoch TV.
Again, Facts Matter. You can find it on YouTube. So I created a playlist. So on April, I believe either 23rd or 28th, I always get those mixed up. But at the end of April, when the audit actually began, I started a playlist on my channel, and I uploaded up, I think, like 15 or 18 different episodes on there. So I try like maybe 2 or 3 times a week to upload an episode giving you an update of the Arizona State Audit, right? And each of those episodes has, let's say, 100, maybe 200,000 views. The likes are maybe 50,000 likes, maybe 80 dislikes. 50,000 likes, 80 dislikes. So, a ton of comments.
In other words, folks, normal YouTube algorithms, this would be like top ranked in terms of, because this is how they weigh it usually.
Yeah.
If they weren't messing with the algorithms, this would be like a top ranked video, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. But if you right now search in YouTube, Arizona Audit, you can scroll I scrolled through 200 of the first listings. CBS, ABC, MSNBC, CNN, talking about how it's a reiteration of the big lie, that it's a sham audit, it's a bogus audit. and this is a news headlines. It's a sham audit. Like, anyway, anyway, that's more of journalistic integrity. Anyway, so that's on the public perception. Like, it's being smeared, basically, right? But when you actually look at the audit, it's being conducted, in my opinion, just from what I've seen and
and we've had reporters, Epoch Times, I mean, calling up, really watching it too. I mean, and we've even had live feeds from it. I mean, it's being done in a pretty solid way, actually.
Yeah. It seems to be conducted in a pretty open, transparent way. At azaudit.org, the Arizona State Senate, they set up a website.
You can watch it yourselves. They have live feeds of it. Yeah.
So the audit itself, the hand recount portion is done. So that was already like maybe 6 days ago that Ken Bennett, who's the audit liaison for the Senate, he's the one kind of who interacts with the press and tells them, what's going on with the audit. He said that as of about 6 days ago, the hand recount portion is done. And now they're moving on to their final step where they're actually authenticating each ballot. So that's basically going through them, making sure that they're not Xerox, making sure that the paper is not is the stock type of paper that is supposed to be used, not like some kind of different type of paper.
And there were people claiming that the paper seemed to be different in several states, actually. Yeah.
So that they're at that portion of the audit. So they're gonna finish up probably. So the last update that I heard is that on June 30th, we actually got a copy of their contracts. On June 30th, the Arizona State Senate's contract with the venue, which is this large Coliseum in Phoenix, Arizona, it expires. So they're going to move out of the Coliseum, which is fine because they're already done with the hand tabulation portion. The rest is basically done on computers. And so they're going to be moving to two separate locations. In Washington State, one company called Cypher, they're going to be doing part of the authentication process. And then down in Florida, the Cyber Ninjas are going to be doing the other part. It'll probably take an extra few weeks. That's what Ken Bennett told us. And then after that, probably another 1 or 2 weeks will be devoted to putting together the final report, which should be available by early August. Yeah. So that's when we'll get the final report, and then we'll see. We'll see what ultimately happens. The Senate Republicans in Arizona, they're kind of sending mixed signals. Wendy Rogers, she's a Senate Republican. She told us that the Senate Republicans are ready to act on whatever they find in the audit. So that means if they find some kind of fraud, I guess they're ready to act on it. What does that mean? I don't know. Maybe it means securing their election for next time, or if there's enough fraud to overturn the election. I mean, that would be like maybe even a first in American history. So we'd have to see what happens.
We're in untreaded territory, and even if there is major fraud found in the audit, you can expect the Democrats, especially. I mean, I doubt Biden's going to step down from office. Put it that way. You're very likely. This is my analysis, of course, but you're very likely, folks, are going to see a lot of legal challenges against the audit, and they're going to audit the audit, and this is very likely going to draw out way past 2022. I mean, this is not going to be a short-term thing. But the important part of it, at least in my assessment, is that, again, you have other states now talking about doing their own audits, especially because they've had representatives from these states go to Arizona, watch how they're conducting the audits, and they're judging already based on what they saw with their own two eyes, whether the audit was being done in a way that is solid and verifiable and done with integrity, right? And based on whether they think it's being done with good integrity and in a solid manner, they're saying, maybe we'll try it in our own state. Now, if fraud is found, if things are found, the other states that have sent representatives there will very likely start holding their own audits, even if that is challenged. And again, you would expect there to be challenges to this, fraud or no fraud, right? If again, they find something with it. Because again, if there was fraud, maybe folks want to cover it up. If there wasn't fraud and they feel there's something wrong, of course, they're going to challenge it anyways. Very likely, again, folks, you're going to see this drag out for at least past 2022. But the important part with it is that other states are going to have their audits, and as they do this, you can expect states to put laws into place more and more, and we already see it happening, to again secure the elections going into 2022. That's generally where things are at with that. And folks, it's getting a bit late. Let's do just a couple questions, and we'll call it tonight because it's again getting late. Real quick though, this is from number one Tonya. You said the Democrats' bill is anti-constitutional against states' rights, the right of the states to control their own elections. Don't you see a major fight from the states on it anyway? Yeah, so basically the bill the Democrats are trying to push through that was just blocked again by the filibuster with Republicans. This is, again, them trying to federalize a lot of the election processes. Now, according to the Constitution, the elections are handled by the state legislatures in the United States, meaning that it's the states that run the elections, not the federal government. Now, on that note, you mentioned, don't you see a major fight from the states on this anyway? Even if they push it through, you're going to see a lot of legal challenges with that. The question would be how that happens. You do have some states right now really pushing back very hard against federal government overreach anyways. Texas, where we're at right now, actually has a great example of this. They're saying they're going to start upholding the 10th Amendment. Now, the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, and Roman, you actually studied the Constitution. You might not know this. Roman's actually a constitutional expert. He studied constitutional law.
It's finally coming in.
Yeah, finally coming in handy.
Yeah. But it's late dormant in my head for a few years.
Yeah. But under the 10th Amendment, the reach of the federal government is actually limited within what is stated within the Constitution. Anything beyond that is actually within the jurisdiction of the states. And I mean, no state has really upheld this until very recently. The states have a lot of rights, and the federal government does not have that much power. If states start exercising the rights they're given through the Constitution, folks, I mean, a lot of this stuff would not be able to happen. I mean, Rome, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree. And your question is really solid, right? It's like they're trying to push a law which you believe is going directly against the Constitution, specifically some of the provisions within HR 1 or the For the People Act, right? That's the new voting act.
For the people, yeah.
Right. So some of the provisions would actually essentially usurp power from the state local governments to the federal government. But the issue is that there's a few. If the law is enacted, right, look at Obamacare, right? A lot of people said that was unconstitutional, but to this day is still the law of the land, right?
And still the Supreme Court is not ruling whether it's constitutional. The Supreme Court is just refusing to rule on the constitutionality of it, and so it's kept in place, even though technically you would argue it's not constitutional. The Supreme Court is just refusing to say whether it is or not, Yeah.
So I mean, we could find ourselves in this limbo where technically you have an unconstitutional, very overarching law throughout the entire country, right? But and maybe even it's generally agreed upon that it's unconstitutional, but it might take years and years and years and years to actually get in front of the Supreme Court, right? I mean, there's so many technical reasons that the Supreme Court can reject the case. Even that recent case, that 7-2 decision about Obamacare, that was on a technicality. They didn't actually examine Obamacare. It was I forgot the exact technical.
Now, they argued that because the Supreme Court just heard a case on Obamacare, but they argued that the whole thing was moot.
Right.
Oh, right.
That's
what we're hearing a lot now. Yeah. It's moot because they got rid of the part of it that forces you to pay into it involuntarily, and because now it's become a voluntary program because of that rather than involuntary. They're saying that they can't rule on it. But the problem is that Joe Biden now is saying he's going to push forward with it, and as long as you have it in place, they're going to try to advance it again. And again, this is going to go back to the Supreme Court again, and then we'll have to see if they choose to rule on it this time. And that's where things are at with it. Yeah.
So that's the situation there. And the other case is, like, even if it, let's say, gets in front of the Supreme Court, you never know how the Supreme Court is going to rule. I mean, Roe versus Wade, right? That's like, I mean, that's the textbook example.
Although the Supreme Court is set to hear a case on it very soon, they could overturn Roe versus Wade, depending on how the Supreme Court votes or whether they choose to vote on it or not. Because we've seen how they've been lately. Yeah,
because I remember the first time I studied Roe versus Wade in school, and then when I was studying constitutional law, it was I looked at my textbook and I almost couldn't believe what I was reading, because I'm sure some of the audience remembers that the justification that the Supreme Court gave was that when you read the totality of the Bill of Rights, it casts a penumbra of privacy on the individual. So the individual has a right to privacy that's not stated anywhere in the Constitution. But a penumbra, by the way, in case you don't know, is when there's the sun, the moon, and the earth, and the shadow that the moon casts on the earth is the penumbra. So they're basically saying that you can kind of feel out this right to privacy within the Bill of Rights, and that is why that now we have a right to abortion. Right. And so I remember reading that and I was like, that's a stretch. That is a stretch.
Well, maybe they don't have the right to, say whether we're vaccinated or not. If that's the case, right? The right to privacy, folks, it's your body, your choice, right?
Exactly. Yeah. so that's the case. But, not too long ago, when I was in Arizona, I had the great chance to interview this former sheriff gosh, I just forgot his name. We just brought him up recently, but he
Is it a repo? A repo?
Not a RIPA. Okay, I'll find it later.
Yeah, it's okay. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. So the sheriff, he won a big Supreme Court case over the 10th Amendment because back during the Bill Clinton administration, the federal government was essentially using state law enforcement officers like sheriffs as well as cops to enforce federal laws. And so the sheriff, he sued the federal government and he won. And it basically said that the federal government cannot utilize state resources to enforce federal laws. So they can't usurp state resources in that manner because that's a violation of the 10th Amendment right. And so in saying that, I mean, I don't know exactly how it would play out with this law, but if H.R. 1 ever does become the law of the land, you could see situations like, for instance, Texas, who are trying to assert their 10th Amendment rights, just not enforcing it. But that would create
which again would be a whole nother court case.
Yeah.
And it would be, again, state by state. You would have to have states basically saying, no, we're not going to enforce this. We're a election integrity sanctuary state. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They could do that just like they're doing with other things, just like Democrats did with sanctuary states with immigration. They could technically do that even if they passed this whole For the People Act, you know, the election bill they're trying to push through. You could see like election sanctuary states. And the argument of state rights again would become this whole issue, you know? Yeah. Anyways, a lot of issues with it. All right, folks, last question tonight. Then we'll call it it. This is Sheila Marie said, Joshua, what is Roman drinking? Yeah. What is Roman's drink? You want some water, Roman?
Yeah, wow. Thank you, Josh, for offering me at the very end some water. You know, I'll tell you, Sheila, thank you so much for asking this question. Before I came on the show, I asked him, what drink are you going to give me? And he just didn't say anything. And now,
well, I have black tea. I have actually English breakfast tea. It's very nice.
Yeah, well, it's too late for me to drink black tea. I won't be able to sleep. But thank you, Sheila. I get some water because of your question. I appreciate it.
All right, folks. Again, Roman Balmakov, he has a show. It's also on YouTube, also on Epoch TV. It's called Facts Matter. Check it out. He does great work there as well. And folks, also, again, I'm on the road right now in Texas currently, actually at NRB, a conference out here doing some reporting. Lot planned, lot going on. Also, folks, this coming Thursday, just a heads up, I will not be doing the Q&A because I'm going to be traveling. My flight had to be around that time, and so I won't be able to make it in time for the Q&A, so really apologize for Tuesday. But I will see you all again the Sunday after that, this coming Sunday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time as usual. Folks, again, as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free.
And smash that like button if you haven't already.